We're really, really excited to show you this kind of second edition of the Homeowner's Handbook to prepare for natural disasters. And certainly appreciate everyone's help and for getting it together. I know several of you on the call today helped out, and also big thank you to Rhett Register, who's going to speak after me, who had a big hand in editing and making sure that the book was absolutely perfect. So thank you to Rhett as well. So just give a little background and some kind of where we are currently. And Philip and I were talking before the session today of, peak hurricane season. Are we still in it? Are we still in the peak season? And yes, so believe it or not, come October 1st, we have 2 more months of hurricane season. So it runs through October and then November through the end of November. So we are in the middle of peak season. And so I like this update from NOAA that they put out on August 6th. I think the original one that they put out was like 6 to 13 named storms. And now we have 19 to 25, 7 to 11 hurricanes, and 3 to 6 major hurricanes on there as well. So 2020 has been busy for anybody who looks on the screen like I do and check my phone and check the NOAA app regularly. You saw a lot of this, or a lot of the little X's and O's that were out in the Caribbean and out in the Atlantic Ocean for quite some time. And I have enjoyed the past couple of days where it's been like there's been no systems identified right now, although we have some eyes on the other ones right now. But because it's been such a busy season, we've gone through all the names. So started with Arthur, and then we ended with Wilfred. And then, of course, as many of you know, we're already on the Greek alphabet that's there to the right with Alpha, Beta, and the next one will be Gamma as well. So in Florida has not come out unscathed from this year's 2020 season as well. So Hurricane Sally made landfall on September 16th. There in the Florida Panhandle as a Category 2 hurricane. They actually said that it came on shore at Gulf Shores, Alabama, but as many of y'all know, the northwest corner of the Florida Panhandle, particularly Escambia and Santa Rosa counties, were heavily impacted with flooding, and these folks are still working through the recovery process in that area. So lots of rain and lots of flooding in that particular area also, with the potential for more, folks. And if you look at the week 2 there on the bottom, that's this week we're in right now, September 30th through October 6th. There's a couple of systems that are indicated that may show up here. So we're keeping a close eye on some of these systems, and we'll continue to monitor them and see what happens for the next 2 months of hurricane season. So impacts from natural disasters, as Floridians, this is not anything new that's new to us. And I really like this chart to the right that was actually done. You'll see that in the map to the right was done on July 8th. So it doesn't include Hurricane Laura that impacted Louisiana, and also Hurricane Sally, which impacted Alabama and Florida as well there on the right, or the wildfires out in California and on the West Coast as well. So there's definitely some things missing from this particular map, but I like this, and NOAA does this every year, and they'd already done one for 2020 showing the billion-dollar weather and climate disasters that have impacted the country. And NOAA also talks about that since 1980, the U.S. has sustained 258 weather and climate disasters, where the overall damage costs reached or exceeded $1 billion. Cumulative cost exceeds $1.75 trillion. So as we know, these natural disasters are very costly and not only have economic impacts, but also social impacts, mental impacts, physical impacts, lots of different impacts that can make recovery very difficult and make recovery very long as well. Which brings in the importance of doing the preparedness and mitigation, and also response, and how we respond and recover after disasters as well, and being able to have a plan in place and have those resources available to folks within these communities to better basically prepare, mitigate, respond, and recover to different types of natural disasters. And so many of you probably remember the original book that was published back in 2013, and the covers of both of them are there on the right, just to give you an idea of what it looked like. And I know many of you had these, and when I first started my position, Dr. Sprenger handed me a very small box and said, this is what's left of them, hand them out. And I think I got rid of them within like the first month of my job. So they were a great resource to have, and I was sad when we actually ran out of them. But it was a collaborative effort with the Gulf of Mexico Alliance, or the GOMA partners. Just to give you a little bit of background of GOMA, it's a partnership of federal, state, and local organizations that share a vision for healthy and resilient communities. I know many of you on this call today are very active with GOMA, and so I'm appreciative of all the efforts of GOMA to put this together. And it includes books for each of the Gulf states, including Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. And the 2013 book was pretty much done by the Florida book was done by Dr. Randy Cantrell, Dr. Michael Sprenger, and Libby Carnahan as well. So a huge thank you to them as well, because a lot of the information is basically what they worked really hard on and putting together, and then we just simply updated it for the book that's coming out now. So this is the cover of the new book here to the right. And again, it was developed as a project of the GOMA Resilience Team, funded by NOAA, Florida Sea Grant, Florida Eden, Smart Home America. And again, the funding was provided by the NOAA Regional Coastal Resilience Grant. So what is actually in the book? So in the book, there are 5 main sections. Excuse me. Understanding the risk of coastal natural hazards. Sorry. Sorry, I had to get a sip of water. Very sorry. 5 sections: understanding the risk of coastal natural hazards, how to prepare yourself and your family, how to protect and strengthen, sorry y'all, how to protect and strengthen your home against natural hazards, the disasters declaration process and funding mechanisms, and how to be more financially secure against hazards. So basically 5 major sections and 5 goals basically of what we're looking at for this book to accomplish as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about part 1 and part 2, and then Rhett's going to talk about a little bit more about the book and just kind of give you an overview of the different parts of the book. Again, it's a very comprehensive resource and a great resource to have and a great tool to have that has a lot of great information in there, a lot of really good information in there. So I'm just going to go over part 1 and part 2, and again, Rhett's going to pick up with parts 3, 4, and 5. So just talking about the first part is actually coastal natural hazard awareness and the different types of natural hazards that are out there that we are susceptible as a Gulf state. And so of course, hurricanes. And so one of the first section talks about the hurricane formation and the different impacts of some of these hurricanes. And you'll see there in the figure to the right, storm surge, rip currents, tornadoes, inland flooding, strong winds, everything that is associated with hurricanes, and some great figures that are also included in here. Second section talks about the Saffir-Simpson scale and the different types of wind for the different categories, including winds 74 to 95, 96 to 110, going all the way to a category 5 hurricane and the wind damage for that. And then section 3 and 4 discuss the storm surge and storm tide, and also the rainfall as well. So going more into the effects of a storm surge and how the storm tide and the impacts that these can have on these communities as well. And then it also discusses rainfall, which also gets into flooding, a little bit into flooding as well. But that's obviously the next section is flooding, the different types of flooding. And so it goes into each one of those different types of flooding. It also talks about how to, when going to your insurance company, the different types of coverage that you may need, in addition to how to put in a claim for different types of flooding as well. So a lot of great information in there. Tornado hazards is another one that they cover in this. And then lastly, additional hazards. So each one of these is a section, including severe thunderstorms, drought, extreme heat, wildfire, earthquakes, tsunamis, a section on sea level rise, and then also a good section on erosion also, which is the picture to the right. So part 2 is one that's very near and dear to my heart. Plan, prepare, and act. So this is a whole section on helping folks be better prepared and planning. And so looking at that preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery for areas of hazard. Okay, so emergency supplies for the home. So in addition to talking about the importance of having some of these supplies within your home, I actually did a screenshot of this from the actual book. This is in the appendix, and it's actually a disaster supply checklist that's right there in the book. So really helpful. It's right there in the back of the book in the appendix as well. And it was taken from you'll see there on the top, it was taken from the FEMA publication, Are You Ready? But again, it's so nice to be able to have this in one comprehensive place as well. Section 2 talks about the evacuation bag, or the go bag as we like to call it, if you're going to need to evacuate. And so again, took this straight from the book. Pro tip, write a list of items on the side of empty totes as a reminder of what to gather when quickly evacuating. And this is something that you can do during blue skies when we're not in the midst of trying to get ready for a hurricane, and have that list ready to go so that when you do need to evacuate for a hurricane, you're able to check it off pretty quickly. And it provides an example there. And then evacuation planning, or how do you plan to evacuate if you were asked to evacuate, and 3 different sections there in this area. Prepare your family, prepare your property, and then it also talked about emergency alerts, which I actually did some screenshots here on the right. It talked about the different apps that were available for different counties at a county level. FEMA also has an app out also that's a pretty good app also if you don't have that already. And then on the right-hand side, it talked about the difference between the flood watch and the flood warnings, tropical storm watch, tropical storm warning, hurricane watch, and hurricane warning, and then that extreme wind warning as well. So understanding the different terminology that you may hear, but also some different apps and things that you can download and be aware of, so that can help you in that preparedness and mitigation stages. And then also evacuation procedures. So as part of that evacuation planning, so how would you proceed in evacuating? And this is just one of the figures that they had in the book, regarding surviving a catastrophic flooding. Unfortunately, I know some folks from Hurricane Harvey, in fact, had to do this. But it talked about the importance of planning for evacuation for a hurricane, planning for a flood, hopefully not as bad as the catastrophic flooding that you see on the image on the right, and then things to do after the storm as well, especially if your home is so damaged that you're not able to stay in there anymore. It talks about some procedures that you can go through, and planning for those ahead of time as much as you can if you are going to have to evacuate your home after a storm. Next section is emergency information and contacts. NOAA puts together these extreme weather information sheets, and they're for different parts of the state. So you'll see this one's Northwest, but there's weather. These weather sheets are available in different areas of the state, including South, Northeast, and Central. I think are the ones that are all of them. And you'll see it even has the county information on the bottom as well. This picture is also in the book also, but they are available for download on the NOAA Extreme Weather website also. And then a really good section on electrical power and issues. And so you'll see each one of these numbers is an actual section, including wet electrical equipment, down power lines, alternate power sources, generators. There's a whole section on generator safety, which I know is something each time we have a storm, that is something that's really out there regarding making sure that folks within the community are safe with their generators. Power stations, the importance of having those portable chargers, and battery chargers that are charged and ready to go if you are to lose power, and if you are to lose the ability to charge all of our electronic devices, of having those battery chargers that are already powered up and ready to go, so that if you weren't able to charge your electronic device, you had a battery charger or backup that would be able to do it. And then inverters as well, whole section on that also. So a lot of great information, and a lot of comprehensive information as well. Section 2.7 actually talks about mental and physical health. And again, the white box on the right, I actually took right from the book, and it was tips on on what folks can do. And you'll see these reactions and feelings can be hurtful to your recovery process, but there are ways to successfully cope with them after a disaster. You can minimize the impact of the feelings and reactions by doing things like, so actually giving some coping tips in there too, which I thought was a great thing to add in with this book. And then throughout the whole book, there's these digital tips, these blocks like this, these tips, these for more information, or these great block quotes kind of thing that provide you with either another resource. For here, it's providing SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration's distress hotline. And there's other tips throughout the book that come out in these little call out box like this that are really helpful. And last but not least, the last section that I'm going to talk about is a guidance for using social media. You'll see that we provided a couple of social media accounts that are helpful to follow, especially for Floridians. But it also talks about within the book the importance of using social media after storms. I know, and I know Scott's on this call, so I'm going to call him out. But Scott actually, after Hurricane Michael, Scott actually called me from Facebook. I didn't even know you could make a phone call on Facebook, but all of a sudden my phone was ringing and it said Facebook call from Scott. So the book actually talks a little bit about using these types of social media, using social media to communicate when phone lines are down or cell phone towers are down and you only have Wi-Fi and a way to communicate, and how you best to communicate with folks. And then I also put a screenshot here of Facebook doing the safety check. And so it talked about making sure that you did use social media to let your loved ones and your friends and family know that you're okay. So that is all for sections 1 and 2. So I am actually going to pass it over to Rhett and let him share his slides. So thank y'all very much.
All right. Thank you, Angie. Y'all bear with me just for a second while. Queued up. So first off, yeah, just thanks to Angie and Philip and the Pi Center for working with us on this. I'm a registrar, I'm communications coordinator at Florida Sea Grant. And as she said, this is the second edition of this book, and I really functioned a lot as kind of an extra set of eyes and an editor, helping track down some of the additional information that was needed. And for me, it was really eye-opening. It was really an interesting thing to learn. I think one thing I'd like to say before I kick off going through sections 3, 4, and 5 is that we don't have an explicit portion on this about COVID, but that it's important to have all these things in a line, just with COVID being one other additional portion of this. So this book really, it is comprehensive, and it's going to give kind of all those other things that COVID only compounds. So while there's not a section directly on COVID, I think all of this really helps people get arranged so that those additional burdens that are added by the pandemic are also, something they're more prepared to face. So I've been asked to talk about parts 3, 4, and 5, and we'll have a little Q&A at the end, and I'll also tell you where you can get these books. Part 3 is really about protecting and strengthening your home. This is things that you can do either rebuilding or buying or building on your own. And it goes through some standards, kind of an overview, a gloss of the building codes, and what those are. It talks about a fortified home, which is really what they're calling beyond code building and retrofitting. It really points towards understanding what risk you face, depending on where you are, and really trying to build or retrofit for those risks. In retrofitting section, it talks about the roof to wall connection and how important really tying the whole house together is. It goes through a really in-depth portion on re-roofing, something that most homeowners are going to have to do at some point in life for their mortgage, and just what you need to do as far as sealing it up and fixing the roof deck to the house and doing tie downs. And then also there's some talk about working on your foundation and just really tying the whole house together. Again, the roof system is a big part that they talk about, and there's a portion in there too about gables and soffits, and just how to, there's some things in here that you can do as a homeowner that you don't necessarily need to get a contractor to do, just some simple things. Part 3.4 is talking about barriers, doors, windows, shutters. This is an image of the large missile impact test, and that's a test that's given on windows and shutters to talk about how resistant they are. And that basically involves shooting a 9-pound 2x4 at the shutter or window at 30 miles an hour, and then following that with wind speeds, and so, or with cycles of wind. So it really goes through the importance of garage and entry doors, and what to avoid. Something I learned was don't use tape. Don't tape your windows, which I always heard, but they said it's a waste of time and there's other things that need to be done. So I thought that was really interesting. The next one, again, is they talk about pressure and what pressure can do to a house and how it needs to all be tied together in the different ways that can be done. There's a special emphasis here on chimneys as being a potential weak point for some of these things. I didn't have a good picture of a foundation, but this portion had about 3 sections or 3 subsections on the importance of foundation and load and water damage and those kind of things. They also talked about flood prevention, some things that can be done if you're in a flood zone. And those 3 different things that they expand on are wet flood proofing, which is basically allowing some portion of your house to be impacted by floods. Dry flood proofing, which is trying to seal out the waters, which is much more difficult and expensive to do, and elevating existing structures. And this image is really some of the benefits insurance-wise that you can get for elevating your home. Interesting section on concrete structures too, of just how there's this note about how concrete structures really survive Hurricanes Katrina and Michael. And then they also talk about safe rooms, which is something I hadn't heard about, but it's a place within a house. If you can't retrofit your whole house, building in your home to prevent or to withstand hurricanes and tornadoes, but not just your house, also within community centers and that kind of thing. Final section on part 3 is about trees, landscaping, and just pruning and just how to identify sick trees and some ways that you can identify those. Part 4 is the disaster declaration process, and this was really interesting about that the governor needs to make the whole steps of how things are determined on a state level and a federal level as being disasters, and then what that means to the homeowner. And this graphic is a picture of the different disaster declaration processes. And the timeline of events, preparedness, and the disaster, and then short term versus intermediate and long term. The next one goes over the rules of local, state, and federal governments. And then this is really before the storm hits the area, and some of the things like staging personnel and equipment, communications, evacuations, triggering memorandums of agreements with state agencies and other communities and the private sector. And then while the storm is impacting the area, some things like opening local shelters, life-saving measures, search and rescue. And then finally, after a storm passes, going through damage assessments, public utilities, getting them back online, coordinating with the state and federal government, and distribute supplies and food. So just to kind of give an overview of the whole process, which is really interesting. There's talk about recovering damage sustained and accessing your insurance, but also working with FEMA, and goes through a lot of the programs that FEMA offers, and just says that it's a good idea to register with FEMA and begin the FEMA assistance application process while going through your insurance claim process, and that saves time. So there's an overview of all of the FEMA programs, and then it points you to somewhere where some of the state programs live. And the federal assistance, it includes FEMA Individual Assistance, the Small Business Association, FEMA Public Assistance, Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, flood mitigation assistance program, community development block grant, disaster recovery. And then, so that's federal. And then at the state level, it points us to the Gulf of Mexico mitigation guidebook, which keeps an update on all of the state programs that you can go to. This is, so after the storm, what do? You know, your head's spinning, and this really gives you some concrete steps on how to move forward. And one of them is this disaster checklist, and just, you know, and the book expands on these kind of things. What to expect from inspections, and then before you start the rebuilding process, some things that are emphasized. Finally, part 5 is just really is about identifying, buying, and using insurance. And it just says 5.1 is shopping for insurance and determining how much insurance you need. And it breaks it down. It says basically you should know the risks and costs of your assets. You should select agents and insurance companies, request quotes and complete applications. Step 4 is compare quotes, and step 5 is purchase the policy. So it just gives you a real kind of bare bones way of finding insurance. And then later on in the section, talks about how to use it. Just makes a note here that insurance for wind events in many states is separate. And so just to be aware of that. Flood insurance is always separate. And then this section talks about the National Flood Insurance Program, the Community Rating System Program, and increased cost of compliance coverage. This section goes through making a claim after receiving loss and the steps that you have to do to go through that. And in section 5, I thought was really interesting and just really gave you some good tips on finally you've gone through all of this, you kind of are ready to rebuild, and how to find a contractor, and things like asking for quotes written out and getting multiple quotes. Just some really good rules of thumb to follow at a time that really can be chaotic. I think Angie went through the appendices, but they're really useful. All of these are lists, and some of them are places to go for additional information. So again, really comprehensive book. It's all there, and if it's not there, it's going to point you to where to go. So that was section 3, 4, and 5 and the appendices. And then you may want to know, after hearing all this, where you can get one. So IFAS has a disaster preparation recovery site, and the whole book is available for download there, and that's at first address. We are also going to be selling it through the IFAS bookstore. That's at second address, and we're selling it at cost. So I think it's $8 a book. We don't have the printed version available yet, but it should be here within a month. We are going to be able to take orders now. And so one of the things we wanted to offer as kind of to say thank you for going through all this with us was an opportunity to place an order for books via a Qualtrics poll that we'll put out. And these will be, we can, up to a certain amount, we don't really know. It depends on how many we're asked for, but we will be able to ship these and provide these at no cost. This is something that the federal government provided to us for coastal resilience, and so we want to pass it along to people who can use it. So, Philip, are you able to provide that poll?
Yes, and I just put it in the chat box to all panelists and attendees. So if you can't see it, let me know, but it should be in there.
All right. And so just finally, we want to open it up to any questions while you're filling that out, and we'll leave it open. But we want to take some questions. So I'm just navigating over to the chat and see if there are any questions there, or I think you should be able to just speak up. We can also put it in the Q&A box. I'm just reading through the chats right now, excuse me. And request for Spanish versions. No, we don't have one. And I'm curious if they did one for the first Spanish version. It's funny you asked that. I just have gone through the translation process for some of the HACCP seafood safety materials. And so we have been working closely with a translator. And that's it. That could be a next step. And I'm making a note of that. But currently, no, there aren't any plans to have it translated. Carrie, do you want to elaborate on that question of were we too late to take advantage of the printing provided by GOMA?
Yeah, and I'll just, this is Philip, I'll just jump in. So yeah, all questions can be put in the chat box. That's where we're taking those. I know with the webinar format, it's participants cannot use their microphone for that, but yeah, feel free to use the chat box. And yeah, I know there's some other questions coming in, but yeah, keep them coming.
So the request for the books, so again, the PDF downloaded from the IFAS Disaster Preparation Recovery site, that's free. You can download that at no cost. The books themselves are going to be sold through the IFAS bookstore at $8 cost, and that basically covers their labor and shipping fees. And so we are receiving, and I should note that we are going to be sending out probably 50 of these to each of the coastal county extension offices. And so they will be distributing from that point as well. So we received in total about 2,500 of these books from NOAA, and they paid for printing of that. And so we're going to do this initial first run. We'll send about 50 to all of the coastal county extension offices for them to hand out. And then we'll also be able to hopefully send some to, if you put your contact information to the poll here. So as far as paying for them, again, the ones that go to the county offices will be free. The ones that we send you, if you put your contact information and the amount you're requesting, those will be free. Then after all of this, if you can't get them either of those two ways and you can't, and the PDF is not enough and you need to purchase them, they're $8 at the IFAS bookstore. Okay. Just going through the chat here. I think we covered everything. Again, it's really a comprehensive book, and I really can't, for homeowners and renters too, I think it's really a good thing just to be aware of all of these things. It's an easy read. It's not overly technical. It's technical enough, but it's you can get through it, and I think it's really helpful. So okay, this is a great question. So someone said, should they resend their request if they are not in a coastal county? No, this is for anybody. This is statewide. So thank you for asking that. We will send the initial set of books, about 50 books to each of the coastal counties, just because we think they're really going to be the most impacted, I think, initially. But if you've requested some and you're not in a coastal county, we will send you what we can as well. All right. This is a good one. And Angie, maybe you want to take this. It's just a question about some other good resources from Eden that we might recommend.
Sure. Thanks, Scott. That's a great question. And before I address that question, I did want to let you know that Red and I are hoping that we'll do an additional printing at some point as well, so that we can offer more than just about 50. So and so therefore we're hoping that we can be able to do an additional printing at a future date also. But Scott, there's some other resources at some of the other universities that have some really good resources, and I'm glad you asked me that question, because our Eden conference was actually just last week, and I wrote down some resources that I've asked some folks if I can share with y'all as well, and I'm waiting to hear back from you from some people. Texas A&M has some new stuff out that I'm looking into as well. But and I'll put the website in the chat as well, but the extensiondisaster.net, which is Eden's new website, has a great resource database on there that they are they are actually right now trying to update. So I'll make sure that I put that in there as well. But there's some newer resources that are out there that I was just made aware of last week that I'll look at hopefully getting for us as well. So thank you. Okay, Kimberly, yeah, Kimberly, you were on that list for getting some to FAMU as too, I know. So thank you.
All right. Well, any additional questions, you can send them to Angie or myself. That's our email contacts and phone numbers. And then also check it out. It's on the IFAS Disaster Preparation and Recovery site. You can just Google that. And then the book is available for download. We'll look and see what we got on this poll, and we'll be in contact about getting these to you. So thank you again for attending this, and send any questions to us at these contact information.